The series begins with Assam, who is now in a street fighting arena. At that time, he has to fight a big, tough fighter who is known to have never lost before. Even though Assam is much smaller, he's not scared at all and starts throwing punches right away. At first, he struggles because it's hard to bring down such a big opponent. But during the fight, he remembers losing to Lee Yong, and the memory gives him a sudden burst of energy. With this new strength, he makes a comeback and wins the fight. After the match, a street fight promoter named Vega comes up to him. She hands him some prize money because he beat her best fighter. However, Assam isn't really interested in the money. He's only fighting to improve his martial arts skills. Hearing this, Vega is impressed and tells him that if he ever needs help, she'll be there for him. Meanwhile, Leary visits the graves of his wife and child, who died from smallpox. Back then, there was no cure for the disease. As he mourns at their graves, a woman named Sophie shows up. She is the younger sister of Penelope, the wife of Mayor Blake. Soon after, Sophie places flowers on the graves, and Leary is touched by her kindness. At the same time, Assam went to see Atoy to get his wounds treated, like he usually does. But this time, it was Atoy's student Lai, who helped him. At that time, Atoy had rescued Lai from a slave auction because she felt bad for her. Lai had been sold by her own father to pay off his debt. Atoy decided to help Lai and took her in. After getting treated, Assam asked about a group he saw at the fighting arena called the Teddy Boys. Atoy explained that they were a racist group of white people who would shave the heads of Chinese people and stick the hair on their jackets to show off. Assam wanted to learn more about them. Meanwhile, Bill was busy working as a debt collector for the Feng Hai gang. He owed them a lot of money and had no choice but to work for them to pay it off. On the other side, Penelope was having breakfast with her husband, Blake, and her sister, Sophie. Penelope wasn't just an ordinary woman anymore cause she had taken over her late father's business. She refused to sell the company, even though Blake had tried to convince her many times. While eating, Sophie told Penelope that she didn't want to be forced in a marriage like Penelope was. This shows that Sophie is quite rebellious and not as graceful as her sister. At the same time, Mai Ling and Li Yong were at the market to buy fruits. While there, Mai Ling saw the fruit seller's wife, who was sick. Feeling sorry for her, Mai Ling bought all the fruits and told the seller to take his wife to get medical help. In the same market, Assam and Young Jun were on patrol because this market was their territory. When Assam saw Mai Ling and Li Yong, he quickly told Young Jun they should leave before any trouble started. In the mayor's office, Blake is talking with Buckley about Penelope's company. They're having trouble figuring out how to make the immigrant workers feel comfortable at the company. Blake and Buckley have a big plan to get rid of all Asians from San Francisco. While these white officials are planning this, the Hopway gang seems pretty relaxed and hasn't made any moves. But Young Jun is getting more and more worried. His gang is facing problems from all sides, like the Long Z gang teaming up with Feng Hai and threats from the white people. Hearing his son's worries, Master Jun tells him to stay calm. He believes the Feng Hai gang will betray the Long Z gang soon. But Young Jun still doesn't get it, so his father scolds him. In another place, Bill goes to see Xing, the leader of Feng Hai, to quit his job. According to their deal, Bill should be free from his debt, but Xing tells him that his debt will never be paid off with this job. So, Xing offers Bill a chance to keep working for him to earn more money than he would as a policeman. Bill is stuck in a tough spot. He hates the Feng Hai gang, but needs the money to support his family. In the end, he agrees to Xing's offer. After coming back, Bill tells his wife that he's done with gambling and will make more money from now on so their family can be happy. But his wife thinks he's hiding something from her. That night, Assam meets Mai Ling to tell her how disappointed he is. When he fought Li Yong, Mai Ling didn't seem to care and let him almost die. Mai Ling defends herself, saying she warned Assam that Li Yong was a tough opponent. She also regrets Assam's choice to go back to Hopway, even after they treated him like trash. Turns out, Mai Ling's words kept replaying in Assam's mind, making him feel uneasy. To clear his head, he practiced Wing Chun alone at the Hopway headquarters. While he was practicing, Master Jun suddenly showed up. Even though Master Jun didn't like him at first, now he needed Assam, especially since Assam could help control Young Jun, who was becoming more emotional. Meanwhile, Leary was busy collecting debts from his workers. He used the money to buy dynamite and other explosives, but it wasn't clear what he planned to do with them. At the same time, the Teddy Boys were torturing a Chinese immigrant and were about to hang him. But before they could, Assam, Atoy, and Lai showed up. The three had formed a vigilante group to punish racists like the Teddy Boys. Without saying much, a fight broke out. Using their amazing martial arts skills, Assam and the others defeated the racist group. Atoy had been working on her own before, but this time, she was glad to have Assam and Lai by her side. The next morning, Young Jun brought in some drugs he had stolen from the Long Z gang's warehouse. It turned out that Long Z was getting their supplies from a cheaper source. If this kept up, the Hop Wei gang wouldn't be able to compete in the drug trade. Young Jun knew that Master Jun wouldn't buy from a different supplier because he was too loyal to his business partner. So, Assam suggested that Young Jun contact a local supplier in America to avoid shipping costs. Meanwhile, the police arrived at the scene where the Teddy Boys were killed. Soon after, Richard Lee figured out that more than one person was involved in the attack, but when nobody listened to his analysis, he got really angry in front of Bill and the police chief. This shocked everyone because Richard Lee never shows his anger. But Bill understood why Richard was upset cause he was still shaken up after being beaten by the Feng Hai gang a few months ago. After investigating, Richard Lee took Bill to see Wang Chao. Richard was sure this man knew all the secrets in Chinatown. When they got to Wang Chao's place, Bill takes some valuable thing, including weapons. He warned Wang Chao that if he didn't reveal who did the massacre, the police wouldn't return his belongings. Elsewhere, a group of Chinese workers who had just arrived in San Francisco were being taken to a factory for work. On the way, they were stopped by Irish workers who didn't like them being there. At the same time, Penelope was meeting with Byron, a successful businessman. Byron wanted to buy her company, but Penelope firmly refused his offer. That night, Assam went to Wang Chao to ask about a cheap drug supplier, but Wang Chao refused to help. He didn't want to ruin his relationship with Master Jun. After turning down Assam, Wang Chao had a private talk with Atoy. He knew that she was acting as a vigilante. Wang Chao begged Atoy to stop for a while because the police were investigating the case. If they found out, the Chinese community could be targeted by racist officials. After hearing Wang Chao's explanation, Atoy apologized for getting his belongings taken away because of her. She promised to hold back for now until things got better. Late at night, Assam went back to the street fighting arena on the ship. He managed to defeat his strong opponent again, this time in just 3 minutes. He was still angry about his loss to Li Yong, and that anger drove him to keep fighting tougher opponents. After a long conversation, Assam asked Vega for help in finding a cheap drug supplier so his gang wouldn't fall behind Long Z. In another part of the city, the streets were very quiet. But in the darkness, Leary suddenly blew up a factory. The explosion became a hot topic among business people. Strangely, all of them suspected that the Chinese people were behind it. They started thinking about ways to tighten security. Penelope, however, didn't blame the Chinese community. Instead, she asked Assam and the Hop Wei gang to guard her factory and its Chinese workers. She offered a high payment for their help. Assam quickly accepted the offer since he needed the money to help the gang, which was struggling because they were losing out to Long Z. With the help of Assam and the Hop Wei gang, the Chinese workers were no longer bothered by the Irish workers. Even Leary didn't dare to cause more trouble because he knew Assam and his friends would catch him. The next day, Assam and Young Jun went with Vega to meet a drug dealer named Happy Jack. Jack was the top drug producer among the black community and sold his products at affordable prices. Without hesitating, they made a deal with Jack to buy a dozen boxes as samples, giving him a down payment of $250 to ensure the goods would be delivered that night. Unfortunately, Jack broke his promise and let down the 2 Hop Wei members. At that time, $250 was a lot of money. Finally, Assam and Young Jun lost their patience and started beating up Jack and his men. After fighting for a while, Jack explained that he didn't mean to break the deal. He had delayed the production because the police were keeping an eye on him. So he suggested that they make the transaction in a safer place. Meanwhile, a group of white citizens gathered to listen to a senator who was trying to get their votes for the upcoming election. The senator promised to kick out Chinese immigrants so white people wouldn't have to worry about competition. In the crowd, the police chief was not happy with this racist speech. He was worried that dividing the people of San Francisco could cause trouble for the police, and he thought the senator's words might lead to a big civil war. After the speech, we see Sophie going into Leary's bar. She really likes the Irish worker and isn't shy about showing it. But Leary seems unsure about Sophie because he had a bad relationship with his father, who used to hire Chinese workers. This goes against Leary's goal of fighting for white workers. Even so, Sophie doesn't give up and keeps trying to make Leary feel comfortable around her. That night, Richard Lee was having trouble sleeping. He had been like this since he was beaten up by the Feng Hai gang. To clear his mind, he went to a nearby bar and ordered a drink. At that time, a woman served him, and she reminded him of his ex-girlfriend. But without him knowing, the woman put drugs in his drink to rob him. On the other hand, the Longzi gang caught a drug dealer from a small gang. Since the drug business is a serious matter, Mai Ling sent Li Yong and Xing to warn the small gang not to steal Longzi's customers. At first, Li Yong just threatened them to make them listen, but Xing chose to use violence. Then a fight broke out. Xing's actions, which went against the instructions, made Li Yong very angry. Also, the Feng Hai gang hadn't been paying their earnings as agreed lately. At that time, Mai Ling decided to collect the money herself. At first, Xing acted like a big boss and refused to hand over the money. But since his gang wasn't as powerful as Longzi, he had to obey Mai Ling in the end. After Mai Ling left, Bill went to the Feng Hai gang headquarters, and this time he had enough. He didn't want to be their servant anymore. So, he announced that he was no longer part of the Feng Hai gang. At the same time, Richard Lee went back to the bar he visited the night before to get revenge and get his money back. He wanted to show that he wasn't someone to mess with. Without saying much, he fought all the thugs involved in robbing him. Meanwhile, Assam and Young Jun started selling their new drugs at a low price. They made a lot of money quickly. Hopway's income became more stable because they also got regular payments from Penelope for providing security. However, Master Jun didn't know about this at all. He would be furious if he found out his son was selling cheap products to customers, especially since he always sold high-quality goods at high prices. But Young Jun focused on making a profit, not on the quality of the goods, because he didn't want his gang to fall behind Longzi. When the gang's finances started to get better, Master Jun brought in new immigrants to join. It wasn't clear why he did this, and it made Young Jun upset because he felt his father always made unclear decisions. This caused more tension between them, especially since Young Jun felt like his father always underestimated him. In another part of the story, a new member named Hong came up to Assam with a friendly attitude. Strangely, even though he just arrived in the United States, he already knew about Assam's loss to Li Yong. This made Assam and Young Jun feel uneasy around him. However, Hong didn't mean to disrespect Assam. In fact, he had a lot of respect for him. Hong told Young Jun that he was a great fighter and, to prove it, he attacked some Feng Hai members who were on night guard. Surprisingly, Hong's kung fu skills were amazing. Assam and Young Jun were left speechless. Meanwhile, Bill was trying to relax at home, dreaming of a better life with his wife and kids. But the peace was suddenly broken when Feng Hai members burst into his house and held a knife to his child's neck. Luckily, Richard Lee was on patrol and quickly came to help by shooting the thugs. Since it wasn't safe anymore, Bill asked his wife and children to leave San Francisco before the Feng Hai gang could attack again. He decided to stay in the city until everything was settled. Later, Bill confessed to Richard Lee that the whole incident was his fault for accepting Xing's offer. He admitted that he should have worked hard to make money and pay off his debt instead of being taken advantage of. Hearing this, Richard Lee couldn't understand why his boss thought that way. To him, people like Bill deserved to be treated poorly. The next day, Bill gathered the police to launch an attack on the Feng Hai gang as revenge. But Wang Chao came to the station to stop him. He warned Bill that the Feng Hai gang had set up traps to massacre the police, and if they attacked, things would get much worse. It could even start a full-scale war between the gangsters and the authorities. Wang Chao also mentioned that Xing was the mastermind behind the Teddy Boys massacre that the police had been searching for. However, Wang Chao had actually lied to Bill. He did this because he had made a secret plan with Li Yong to frame Xing as the murderer, even though he knew the real culprits were Atoy, Assam, and lie. Wang Chao wanted to pit the police against the Feng Hai gang so that Bill would give back the items he had confiscated. Meanwhile, Bill reported to the police chief about Xing's involvement in the Teddy Boys' murder. There, he asked for permission to form a squad to arrest Xing. Elsewhere, Mai Ling and Li Yong were walking around the market to buy some things. A small businessman there asked Mai Ling to borrow $300 to grow his laundry business. But instead, the gang leader gave him $1,000 on the condition that he would give back 40% of his profit. Hearing that, Li Yong was surprised because he thought the cut was too high for an investor. He protested to Mai Ling, who seemed to be getting greedier every day. The Longzi gang was supposed to protect fellow Chinese immigrants, not take advantage of them. But Mai Ling cleverly argued that she had to double her money as much as possible to keep up with the enemy gang. That night, an activist named Nellie Davenport visits Toy's brothel. She wants to invite the women there to work on her vineyard. Nellie believes that women should have better jobs and not just be used to satisfy men. Toy listens to her politely, but says that all the women in her brothel live there peacefully. In other words, they choose to be there as sex workers. Toy assures Nellie that she treats them fairly and with kindness. Meanwhile, Blake is pressuring Penelope to sell their railroad company. He also wants her to fire all the Chinese employees and hire white workers instead. But once again, Penelope stands her ground and refuses to follow his wishes, knowing it's all about politics. Plus, Blake can't interfere with her company because of a contract. If he tries to break it, he will have to pay a fine to Penelope. After arguing with her husband, Penelope is still in a bad mood and takes it out on Sophie. She's upset that Sophie chose to have a relationship with Leary instead of marrying the nice man she picked for her. Not willing to be bossed around, Sophie fights back and goes to see Leary. It turns out that the labor leader is planning another explosion, this time aiming to bomb Penelope's factory because it employs Chinese workers. However, Leary changes his mind because he doesn't want to upset Sophie. Surprisingly, Sophie tells Leary to go ahead and blow up the factory because she wants to teach her sister a lesson. Without thinking twice, Leary and Sophie went straight to the factory with their men. They didn't know that the Hopway gang was still guarding the place. So, they had no choice but to fight. Even though he got cut, Leary managed to defeat all the Hopway members and then blew up the factory. After the explosion, Sophie felt really guilty. Because of her quick anger, her sister had to suffer a huge loss. Not only that, she also destroyed their father's inheritance. The next day, Penelope visited her factory, now in ruins from the explosion. She was both angry and sad about what happened. While checking out the damage, her assistant told her they found drugs in the factory. It turned out that all the drugs belonged to the Hopway gang. Assam had accepted Penelope's offer to guard the factory, just so he could use it as a drug warehouse. Penelope felt confused and disappointed with Assam for betraying her trust. Even though Assam apologized, Penelope still kicked him out and ended their friendship. Later, Penelope decided to sell the remaining factory assets. The factory needed a lot of repairs to keep making railroad tracks. Instead of spending a lot of money on fixing it, she thought it would be better to sell the assets and use the money to build a new factory. Blake also asked her to just focus on being a housewife, so she wouldn't have to worry about running the factory. But Penelope stood her ground and said she wouldn't sell her father's inheritance or just become a stay-at-home housewife. At the same time, Atoy arrives at Nellie's vineyard. It turns out that all of Nellie's workers are former sex workers she saved. As a woman, Atoy is moved by Nellie's kindness and now understands why Nellie wants to help the girls in her brothel to work on the farm. Meanwhile, Bill and his team are ready to attack the Feng Hai gang, just as they planned. But before they go in, they have to wait for a signal from Wang Chao and his employees, who are going to trick Xing by pretending to sell him weapons. However, things go wrong when Xing takes Wang Chao hostage because he thinks the weapons are too expensive. At the same time, Wang Chao and two unknown people kill some Feng Hai members behind the headquarters. It turns out they're Li Yong and his men, working with Wang Chao. Secretly, Li Yong puts a sword in Xing's room to make it look like Xing was the one who killed the Teddy Boys. But their plan is discovered by the Feng Hai gang members, and a fight breaks out. Hearing the gunshots, Bill and the police storm into the Feng Hai headquarters, turning the place into a chaotic battle. When all of Xing's men are defeated, Zing has to face Li Yong, who is eager to break his bones. They both agree to fight fairly, like martial arts masters. They take their stances and use all the skills they have. But their fight is cut short when Bill shoots. Seeing this, Li Yong decides to leave, letting Zing be arrested by the police. After the long fight, the police finally close the Teddy Boys murder case, even though they don't know it was all a trick by Wang Chao and Li Yong. They clean up the scene and secure all the evidence they find. At that moment, Assam was really upset because all his drugs were burned in the explosion at Penelope's factory. To let out his anger, he went to the fighting arena to beat people up. After the fight, he was surprised to see Mai Ling there. She had come to apologize for everything she had done, especially for letting Li Yong almost kill Assam before. In the past, Assam had saved her when Bolo, the Hopway executioner, tried to kill her. But now, Assam was too disappointed to talk about it. With tears in her eyes, Mai Ling said goodbye and left, feeling a mix of emotions. After she left, Assam asked Vega to help him find a different fighting arena because he needed money to make up for the losses in his drug business. The next day, Vega invited Assam, Youngjun, and Hong to join a tournament in her hometown. She explained that the arena was run by a mafia boss who loves to watch people fight. The winner of the tournament would get $2,500 in cash, which was more than enough for Assam and his friends. In this tournament, participants were not allowed to carry firearms, and if anyone was caught with one, they would be executed right away. All the fighters gathered in the arena to hear a speech from the tournament's creator, Rooker, a mafia boss who looked well-dressed but enjoyed watching fights. After starting the tournament, Rooker announced that this year's event was to celebrate his wedding anniversary with his young wife. So, the tournament began with fighters from different places, each skilled in various martial arts like Taekwondo, Kung Fu, Capoeira, and even monkey claw techniques. Before his turn, Assam studied all the opponent's techniques with just one look. Even though he only watched for a short time, he could use those techniques in his fights and managed to defeat his enemies in less than a minute. Because of his amazing skills, Assam caught Rooker's attention. After the match, Rooker invited him to lunch. But before they could eat, a group of fighters planned to take down Assam. Luckily, Hong knew about the plan and fought all the fighters by himself. Meanwhile, Assam and Vega went to have lunch with Rooker, his wife, and the head of his bodyguards. While eating, Rooker kept praising Assam's fighting skills and how well he could read his opponents. Rooker even offered to hire him as a martial arts teacher for his men. But Assam politely refused, saying he was just a simple fighter who needed money. As lunch was ending, Vega suddenly changed the topic to talk about Rooker's antique gun. Curious, Rooker handed the gun to Vega to look at. To be safe, the head of the guards took out all the bullets before giving the empty gun to Vega. Vega explained that this gun had been on her mind since she was a teenager, because her father was killed by an arrogant white man using that exact gun. Rooker instantly went quiet, remembering his past. It turned out that the white man Vega was talking about was Rooker himself. This made the mafia boss nervous because he realized Vega was there to get revenge. In a quick move, Vega took out a bullet. Not wanting Vega to get hurt, Assam rushed to take her away, but the head of the guards had already called in troops to surround Assam and his friends. Luckily, Rooker's young wife couldn't stand the idea of them being killed. Instead, she took them to prison. It seemed like she knew Vega, but tried not to show it. On the way to prison, Assam and the others felt upset with Vega for not telling them about her revenge plan. They thought that if she had told them from the start, they could have helped her in a safer way. Vega replied that she wasn't just acting recklessly. She had actually bribed the police, so they would let her go once they were out of town. Surprisingly, it was Rooker's young wife who bribed the police. Even more shocking, she was Vega's younger sister. She had married Rooker to get close to him and plan revenge, since Rooker had killed their father and taken all their property. Vega's sister then gave thousands of dollars to Assam and the others as a thank you for protecting her sister. But their happiness didn't last long. As they were about to leave, they were suddenly attacked. Vega was shot and died, leaving her sister crying in pain. This was supposed to be their chance to live happily, but fate had other plans, and Vega's sister had to face a harsh reality. After some time, Assam, Young Jun, and Hong returned to Hopway headquarters to get back to their normal activities. But as soon as they arrived, Master Jun scolded them. He had found out about their illegal business. As the gang leader, he felt betrayed because Young Jun had gone against his orders not to sell cheap goods. Even though Young Jun tried to explain that they were only trying to keep the gang from going bankrupt, Master Jun wouldn't listen to any excuses. He punished Young Jun by pressing a heated sword against his hand. Master Jun also ordered his men to get rid of Assam because, ever since Young Jun became friends with him, he had become more rebellious. But to his surprise, most of the Hopway members sided with Young Jun and Assam. Turns out, Master Jun's strict principles were putting his own gang in danger. Realizing he no longer had the strength to lead, Master Jun decided to step down and hand over power to Young Jun. But before leaving, he told Young Jun that he wouldn't be able to lead the gang well. The next day, Assam went to see Wang Chao to buy a sharp weapon. He was worried there might be a split in the Hopway gang because some members still hadn't accepted Young Jun as the leader. He also wanted to be prepared in case the Long Z gang suddenly attacked the now weaker Hopway. Wang Chao realized that Assam was actually the real leader behind the scenes, as he was the most influential person in Young Jun's life. Indirectly, every decision Young Jun made was influenced by Assam. Meanwhile, Zing was on trial in San Francisco. During the trial, Bill acted as an expert witness, presenting evidence that Zing was a serial killer. The judge believed all of Bill's testimony, finding Zing guilty and sentencing him to death. After the trial, Bill and the other police officers were awarded by Blake for solving such a big case, even though the case had been manipulated by Wang Chao and Li Yo. Not long after, Bill and Richard Lee were shocked to find another massacre victim. They started to think that Zing wasn't the real killer. The night before, Atoy and Lai had gone into action again because they found out that many Chinese women were being held captive by white men. So, they decided to free the women and get rid of their captors. At that time, Atoy planned to take these women to Nellie so they could have proper jobs. She also wanted to give her land to Nellie so she could expand her vineyard. That way, more Chinese immigrants could work there. However, Atoy's land certificate was in the hands of a white man because she didn't have an ID at that time. Without her knowing, the man had secretly mortgaged her land, so when Atoy went to get her certificate, she was confused. In response, the man decided to hire someone to kill her. At the same time, Atoy took all the women who were rescued the day before to Nellie's place. She also asked Lai to work on the vineyard instead of being a vigilante like her. Atoy felt Lai was still very young and deserved a comfortable life. At first, Lai refused because she wanted to stay with Atoy, who had saved her life. But Atoy insisted, making Lai stay with Nellie. Before leaving, Atoy hugged Lai and told her that everything would be okay. Meanwhile, Blake tried once more to convince Penelope to sell her company's assets. This time, Penelope had enough and decided to divorce him right then and there. Not accepting her decision, Blake went into a rage and became violent. Soon after, Sophie rushed to protect her sister from the angry mayor. With the help of Penelope's assistant, Blake was knocked out. But soon after, Penelope realized that her husband was no longer alive. After this incident, Buckley and the police chief came to investigate and asked Penelope what happened. Penelope, still in shock, said she couldn't remember. Meanwhile, Sophie told Bill that the person who killed Blake was Penelope's assistant, even though her sister wanted to protect the assistant from getting involved in the case. The next day, Buckley was made acting mayor to finish Blake's term. On that same day, he ordered the police to search Chinatown for Penelope's assistant, who was an immigrant from China. Elsewhere, Young Jun looked worried after hearing the news about Zing. He feared the remaining Feng Hai members might join Long Z and threaten Hopway's position. So, he asked Assam and Hong to help him take down all the Feng Hai members. On the other hand, Mai Ling just found out about the leadership change in the Hopway gang. She thinks that Young Jun will break the agreement made by Master Jun to not interfere with Long Z's illegal goods business. Because of this, she asks Li Yong to stay on guard in case that happens. The next day, Bill and the police did a thorough investigation in Chinatown and found out where Penelope's assistant was hiding. He was also ordered to close off the area and temporarily shut down Atoy's brothel, as it was often used as a hideout by criminals. Bill also asked Assam for help to hand over the assistant if he saw him. However, Assam, who knew Penelope's assistant, decided to stay quiet. That night, Buckley secretly met with Mai Ling to ask for help from the Longzi gang. He wanted Mai Ling to send her men to capture Penelope's assistant. But as a gang leader, Mai Ling didn't agree to help for free. She asked Buckley to assist Longzi in taking down the Hopway gang, which was becoming more of a threat to her. Buckley agreed to the deal. Meanwhile, Nellie visited Atoy and invited her to stay at her house instead of being alone at her brothel. But just as they were about to leave, two policemen entered to conduct a raid. However, they weren't real policemen. They were assassins hired to kill Atoy. Then a fight broke out immediately between Atoy and the two attackers. Turns out, the fight was intense. There, Atoy used her martial arts skills to defend herself and strike back. In no time, she managed to take down one of the attackers. However, the other assassin was tougher, and the battle went on with high intensity. Even though she struggled at first, Atoy managed to defeat both assassins using her signature sword. After that, she went to confront the person who had her land certificate, knowing they were the ones who sent the assassins. She forced them to hand over the certificate if they didn't want to meet a bad end. Meanwhile, Bill went to see Wang Chao to tell him where Penelope's assistant was hiding. Since Wang Chao was an informant, he could find people quickly. When Wang Chao returned to his armory, he was surprised to see Penelope's assistant hiding there. The assistant begged Wang Chao to help her escape from America. Listening to her plea, Wang Chao told Penelope's assistant to get into a coffin so she could be smuggled onto a ship. But instead of taking her to the harbor, Wang Chao handed her over to Mai Ling. As agreed with Buckley, he let the police take Penelope's assistant to court. On the way to court, the police were stopped by Irish workers who wanted to deal with Penelope's assistant in their own way. They couldn't accept the death of Blake, who they saw as a hero because he was the only mayor who cared about them. But when Bill refused to hand over Penelope's assistant, the workers went wild and attacked the police. They also stormed into Chinatown, attacking Chinese people without mercy. Seeing this chaos, Mai Ling and Wang Chao quickly ran away to avoid getting caught in the riot. In the middle of all this, Young Jun gathered his men to help protect the residents. Surprisingly, Li Yong also brought his troops and offered to work together. He decided to ignore Mai Ling's orders to stay out of the trouble. To save innocent people, he was willing to join forces with the Hopway gang. Without wasting time, both gangs fought back against the Irish workers causing the trouble. Meanwhile, Mai Ling and Wang Chao took shelter in Atoy's brothel. They were shocked to find Atoy lying on the bed, badly injured. Feeling sorry for her, Mai Ling rushed to help treat her wounds, while Wang Chao stayed downstairs to guard the place from being looted. Unexpectedly, the battle outside kept going for almost 3 hours. The Hopway and Longzi gangs didn't give the Irish workers any chance to win. However, young Jun found himself struggling against a large worker. Just in time, his father showed up to save him. Even though they had their differences, Master Jun still cared about his son's life. Not long after, police reinforcements arrived to stop the fight that had killed many workers. The Chinese immigrants were stronger and more skilled. This made Leary worry about his friend's safety. That night, Assam and his gang went to the Union to take down the body of Penelope's assistant, who was hanging in front of their headquarters. The Hopway gang wanted to give her a proper burial. Assam gave Leary a sharp, angry look, even though Leary wasn't involved in the riot. The next day, the people of Chinatown painted Assam's face on the city wall to thank him for his help. He was seen as a hero now. Meanwhile, Mai Ling felt guilty for handing over Penelope's assistant to the police. Because of her decision, many immigrants had suffered during the riot. On the other side, Assam visited Atoy, who had just recovered. He was surprised to learn that Mai Ling was the one who saved him, because he thought his sister had lost her sense of right and wrong. Later, Mai Ling and Li Yong visited Hopway headquarters to congratulate young Jun on becoming the new leader. This time, she wanted to offer peace and suggested they work together in the illegal goods business. But young Jun quickly refused, still holding a grudge against the Longzi gang for making things difficult for Hopway. Seeing that her plan to make peace had failed, Mai Ling slyly revealed that Assam was her brother, hoping this would make young Jun angry and kick Assam out of the gang. After that, she planned to invite her brother to join the Longzi gang. After finding out the truth, Young Jun felt betrayed, even though he had thought of Assam as his own brother. What made him even angrier was that Assam's sister was the leader of the Longzi gang, so he suspected that Assam might be playing both sides. Because of this, he told Assam to think carefully about his choice whether to stay loyal to Hopway or side with his sister. Confused and unsure, Assam went to Leary's headquarters. There, he met with Leary and asked him to stop attacking Chinese immigrants. He pointed out that Leary and his men were also immigrants from Ireland, so they should help each other instead of fighting. But instead of agreeing to make peace, Leary challenged Assam to a duel in the street fighting arena. Needing to let out his frustration, Assam accepted the challenge. In the fight, Assam was actually much better, but Leary had incredible physical endurance, making it hard for Assam to beat him. As he started to get tired, Assam decided to fight smarter, targeting all the weak points on Leary's body. In the end, he managed to defeat Leary in front of his own men. Before leaving, Assam warned all the white people there to stay away from Chinatown. If they dared to bother the Chinese immigrants again, he wouldn't hesitate to fight them all. The next day, Richard Lee decided to quit the police force. He felt he had failed to protect the community, especially since his superiors were using the police for their own political interests. And Bill, his boss, tried to convince him not to leave, saying that Richard was the only honest and fair officer and could be a role model for younger cops. But no matter how much he tried, Richard stuck to his decision to resign. Meanwhile, Penelope sent an article to the newspaper, claiming that her assistant was made a scapegoat by Buckley so he could look good and get elected as mayor in the next election. Unfortunately, the article was not published because all the media companies supported Buckley. Frustrated, Penelope slapped the mayor. Not accepting this, Buckley cleverly injured himself and accused Penelope of attacking him. He also claimed that she had gone insane since her husband's death. Because of this, Penelope was sent to a mental hospital. That night, Mai Ling met with Buckley to remind him of his promise. She asked him to use his power to destroy the Hopway gang. The mayor then gathered his officials to make a plan to take down the gang. He wanted to arrest everyone connected to Hopway and put them in jail. During the meeting, Leary suddenly entered the room, looking beaten up. He volunteered to help Buckley so he could get revenge on Assam. At the end of the story, we see Zing locked up in a dark cell. He has to serve a 3-month sentence before being executed. Strangely, he seems calm, not afraid of what's coming. And that's where the story ends. The series ends. The moral lesson from this series is if you ever end up in a gang war, just make sure you're really good at martial arts and have a backup plan, or maybe just avoid gangs altogether.